22nd, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. And today we are going to go into our model of the advisory board operating system, and specifically we are going to look on the controls and resilience portion. So let me pull the model together so we have the visual reference. What are we talking about? Because today is about this section here, which is about performances, governance, risk and compliance, and obviously our assets. And a curious information here. Back in the 70s, the company's assets were measured in around, or they were accounted in around 80 to 90% of the companies in terms of assets. And the remaining percentage, like 20 to 10% of the company, were intangible assets. Now, in current times, I mean, we are from the 2000 back to this 2026, the things flipped. So the assets, the intangible assets now account in anything between 80 to 90% of the company, and the rest are tangible assets. Why is this flipping? Because actually now is a new appreciation of what is intellectual property, royalties, franchising, etc., etc. So the company started to realize that the things are more intangible represents the brand, and this is an asset that is more valuable because it's more transferable. It's much easier to raise funds against it. Just an example, add value to the shares of the organization than actually the physical assets. So this is very important because all these, if you don't have these very good performances, your governance, risk and compliance, and particularly your assets, so your systems, your controls, and by extension, your resilience, very well crafted, then you have a problem, because actually when investors or funding organizations look into your organization, they will see the value of your organization as a less favorable if you have a very well documented assets with your IPs, your royalties, etc., etc. So look into that section. We are not going to go into that now, but look into that, because if you are purely about physical assets in your organization, I'm 100% sure that you're going to find intangible assets that will increase the valuation of your company. So back from the assets lens, today is about, as I mentioned, performance, governance, risk, and your assets, and particularly following this week theme, which is internationalization of your business. This is where usually the noise starts, because you internationalization, I mean, right? Because you have more markets, more suppliers, more data, more customer promises, more reporting packs, but not always is truth, right? So, and this is where I come in as a board advisor. I put together a rotating international advisory board around the milestones in front of your company. So the organization gets a specialist capability needs in a fraction of the time it takes to hire one executive, without the big consulting overhead, without the talent locking, and with members in the advisory board that can swap every 6 months or so as the project evolves. Because you don't want a highly specialist team for 6 months, and then when the project is delivered or the company is moving to the next phase, what you're going to do with this highly specialist team that, with all due respect to their experience, capacities, trainings, experiences, etc., but you're moving into another section, which is, for example, the section 4 in our model here in front of us, which is having an edge, more relevancy into the coming future. So you need other kind of talent there. So we can swap these people and get the more or the best possible candidate on the position that they need to be at the project evolves. So the risk I like to address today is operational noise, right? So in your systems, and I always say this, when people say systems, immediately they focus on IT, software, but not. Systems are the things that actually, the workflows, the standard operations procedures, the activities that your company work on. And this is something that we're going to have a conversation today, because the business starts receiving more information and understanding less what's going on. So let's look at three problems with this. The first is resilience. But now is something you have to show, not something you can simply say, right? And I'm referring to UK as every day, because I think it's clearer, it's documented, it's public domain, so you can have a template, a blueprint of what the UK organizations are doing, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't matter the size of your company. You can take these ideas and bring it to your organization. I can assure you that you're going to save tons of money, stress, and ideas, burning ideas just for when things are already there, right? So let's look into what the Financial Council Authority says. That from March this year, the firms, they have to use their self-assessment to review and evolve their resilience approach. And this is mapping and testing important business services. So, surprise. So now the Financial Authority is saying you have to map and test your business services, at least the most important one, because actually this and also in provision 29, they are requiring the boards or the executive teams or the founders to self-assess their efficiency in doing their jobs, right? You have to now deliver a report where you say, how efficient are you doing your job? It's like a self-assessment. You cannot say, yes, we have the policies, we have the order, we have the procedures, we are good. But now you also have to demonstrate that you're efficient doing that activity and as part of your job. So the things are getting tighter, but I think with a good, if you look at this into a good way, is helping you to achieve your overall higher purpose, right? Because as far as I understand, nobody gets up in the morning trying to fail. So instead of complaining of things, and I heard a good good amount of complaint about these kind of things, look into the other side. Like it's a kind of a spectrum of positive or negative. What is the positive side of this? I say, hold on a second. Actually, these are things actually we can help. That can help our growth. That can help to tighten our systems, our processes, our ways to do things. And actually, if we don't have it, at least we know there is a way to go it. And if we don't have the capacity in cash or personnel today, at least we can put a plan to start to do one at a time every quarter or whatever is the case, until you get that level of excellence or world class, as they call it, world class qualities. Now, second problems I want to mention is cybersecurity. As usual, today environments are harder than many boards, executive teams, and founders would like to admit. And I'll give you an example here. And this is coming from the National Cybersecurity Center, that they had 204 national significant cyber attacks. That's what they reported in last year, 2025, compared to 89 on the prior year in 2024. So how I can put this? The 43%, also from the National Cybersecurity, 43% of the company identified the breaches or the attack, but 20% suffer less one cyber crime, right? So 43% of the company, they were surveyed. Yes, they report attacks, but 20% say they had less attacks. So what that means, right? So I'm not going to go very, very spooky here, but in other words, they are getting more sophisticated, and the system to catch them up seems to be always a step behind. But now the sophistication are catching up, because, for example, now in certain countries, the operators, for example, for phone scams, if you look into your phone, many of the activities that already identified from the phone operator, they already identified if this is a cyber crime or not. So they call never reach to you. Absolutely fantastic advancement in technology. But if they don't know if this is a commercial call or people calling you from landlines or mobile phones that actually don't have identified as a cyber crime directly, at least in your screen, and I don't know if you noticed that, this call is saying And I have these messages many times, and it saves me a lot of time because I don't happen to you that somebody call you and say hello and nobody's coming back to the other side, or they say add me to WhatsApp, kind of a robotic voice. Well, those calls now I see on my screen if it's a suspicion of a potential scam, so I don't answer that call anymore. If I see that message, I don't answer the call, and if somebody really trying to reach out to me is going to leave a voice message, guess what? In the past week, zero voice messages. So probably were all fake calls or scam calls. Who knows? But you see, you have to prepare your organization also for these kind of things. Now, and this is bridging to the third problem, which is the weak controls do not stay hidden for long, right? Look what happened with advanced computing. And this is coming from the Information Commissioner's Office. Advanced computing was fined 3.7 million after failing to put data of almost 80,000 people at risk, right? How they find out and they find them. So if they reach to the point to find them, it means actually the breach was quite substantial. It was not something like, oh, sorry, we forgot something. There was some serious risk there. And the same happened to LastPass, which is a software company that store your passwords. So you don't have to put all your password on every web page you go, or services automatically pop in the software. I have to find out what they do, because they were fined to 1.3 million after 1.6 million UK customers personal data was exposed, right? So if the service providers at the same time protects you, like in the phone, at the same time others, they fail to do so. And they say, what all this have to do with me? Because it's part of the risk that you're having as a consumer, as a business, or as an individual, right? Because many companies have part of these services in their organization, and you have to be aware that you have to put extra measurements of control in these kind of things. And you say, why are you telling me this when I'm going international? Because when you are going international, cross-border to another country, or another continent, these problems multiply. It's not that they add, they multiply, because you have different legislation, you have different controls, you have different security system, etc., right? Even if they are international companies, the local law sometimes have or not have certain features that you can say, well, this is good, this is not good. For example, one of the biggest issues in terms of storing data in cloud is where the data center is located, right? So for marketing agreements a few years ago was a massive issue in terms of GDPR, having data centers with European customers sitting in other countries or geographies that were not the European Union, right? So if you had and this was not small business, I'm telling you, was big enterprise businesses. They have amazing software for marketing, but all the customers' database was sitting in a different country outside the European Union. And that was a massive breach of GDPR. You can imagine how hard it was to sell these kind of systems. Very hard, because the companies couldn't justify it couldn't go over the loop of GDPR, because their data centers with the customer's location, with the customer's data, was in a different country. Anyway, in other words, imagine a cross-border operating system is an aircraft. Yeah, the aircraft dashboard, you see all these dials and gauges. So what is this? So if every dial is flashing, but none of them is telling the same story, the problem is not information. The problem is the controls that you have, right? So at the end, or the bottom line of the message with these problems is that international expansion really goes into how good you control your company. So so as a board, as an executive team, or as a founder, you have to ask this question. If the business enters 2 new markets next quarter, will reporting become clearer or more moody? Is it going to be more clear what we understand what's going on, or we are going to start to have different information in different places and we don't know what's going on, and we try to, or actually what happens is you start to audit the past. You cannot have real-time information today to operate your business, and you start to audit the past, and that start to create a lag in the business. So yeah, it looks good in revenue, it looks good in marketing, but in terms of control of the business, start to show where all the cracks you have in your own home country or your headquarters. So as a board advisor, what I would propose to consider is the following. Number one, build the operational spine first. Document the key processes, clarify accountability, tighten the onboarding, set comparable KPIs, make it clear who owns quality, escalations, and exceptions. Without that, expansion will come very, very noisy. The second thing to consider is force governance visibility. So the boards, the executive team, and the founders should be able to compare performances across units and markets without relying on local storytelling. And this is a problem too, because actually if you rely on local storytelling, what happens with your brand? What happens with your controls, your performances? Because you cannot compare apples to apples, right? So you have to be careful there. More dashboards are useless if they give you less reality of what's going on in the system. And the third thing to consider is test operation repeatability. And can the operation model be repeated without chaos, right? So can delivery quality stay consistent? Can management reporting arrive on time, right? So can the company hold control without the founder standing in the middle of every important conversation? And this is where you start the repeatability and the capacity to make local decisions or fast decisions, or sometimes, many times, you have the wrong people in the right place, right? Because you say, oh, we are going to promote you and we are going to bring you and your family to the next country. But guess what? That person doesn't have the network, doesn't have the recognition, doesn't have the relevance in that market, and is a very good idea, even if they speak the same language, even if, like a typical case of people from the UK that go to US. The local market will do business with you as far as a certain point, and then they will stop. But if you bring a talent that is a native person in that area from, I'm just throwing a name, Chicago. So it's somebody from Chicago that have a vast work experience and network and connections in Chicago, I can assure you that business is going to prosper way much better if you bring somebody that actually probably more talented. And I'm not saying anything wrong, but it's a reality, that been in your business longer, but I have never been in Chicago except for a city tour, right? So you have to be very strategic how you put your talents to operate your businesses when you're expanding internationally. So next challenge is, if the systems, right, can be more repeatable, how can your board or your as a executive team or as a founder ensure the business still feels coherent, distinctive, and valuable as it expands, right? And then here's a key word. If you're looking for any of these ones, look for the first one, valuable. So you want to increase your valuation by 1x, 2x if you're going international. You don't want that actually stay at the same valuation portion, because then what is a point rather than marketing and PR? You want to get the business a bigger valuable assessment, right? So if your company today have, I don't know, 3 million EBITDA, you want to go at 3.5, 3.4, or 4 million EBITDA. You want to increase by 25% the valuation of your company, or double it, whatever is the case. But look at the valuation of your company when you're going international as part of your measured controls, if it's a go or no go. So what do you gain working with me? So 3 things: business outcomes, differentiators, and risk reductions. In terms of business outcomes, I help you to build boards that turn control and resilience into a working international operational layer in your organization. So the company is easier to trust, easier to finance, and harder to disrupt. That's very important. Number 2 is, in terms of differentiator, I built a rotating international advisory board around the exact resilience and operating gap in front of the company, bringing the right expertise across governance, controls, cyber reporting, operational design, recovery, you mentioned. So all this is considered as the right stage, at the right sequence, at the right pace. because all these have a rhythm. If you break that rhythm and you say, well, we can do it faster, but how long is going to stay? Because remember, one of the things that we're looking today is about resilience. So you want to be resilient in time. And how I help reduce your risk is members can be swapped every 6 months as the risk profiles changes. So the board gets the right specialist capability for the stage it is in today, right? So without locking the business into a static structure, then they cannot move to the next stage on the projects or the international expansion, because they're very, very good setting up the company abroad, but unfortunately, that's what all they do. So now we need to go to market, do distribution, marketing agreements, etc., etc. And you want other specialists and local specialists in that particular challenges to help the company continue with the plan. So one action you can take home today, and it's doable in 30 minutes or less. Before your next board meeting, ask for the one-pager operational spine map that shows 4 things. Number 1, the 5 processes that must be standardized across markets, right? So you want to have what I mentioned earlier, apples to apple, oranges to oranges, right? So you need the 5 processes at least that must be standardized across markets. The second thing is the 3 largest third-party dependencies. You want to make sure that actually those dependencies start to shrink, not to get bigger now. And the third, find the core KPIs by market, right? So then you have the dependencies, what is standardization, and then these are the particular things that you have to consider because are not comparable and not dependable to each other, right? And the last thing is a single point where visibility currently breaks. So if you have something in the processes that you say, here I cannot understand what's going on, flag that thing and look into that very carefully, because probably if you have no visibility in something, is like a blind spot when you're driving. That is a dangerous situation. You perhaps not today, but you have to have a mechanisms how to address those visibility blind spots. So let's pause here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow I will move into transformation and reinvention, which is part of your international expansion, because a repeatable operating model still isn't enough if the business loses its coherence, leadership depth, and the edge as it grows. Right. So if you're interested and you want an international advisory board to strengthen your control, sharpen resilience, and turn international complexity into operating discipline, let's have a 30-minute call so I can understand where you are today, what you are like to achieve, and how I can help you to put this board together for the benefit of your organization. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.